Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be talking about how to calculate the percentage of alcohol inside mixed drinks. When you make alcohol, you have two types of drinks. You have the fermented drink, which includes beer, wine, cider, or you have the stronger drinks, which are the distilled drinks that you need a machine to distill, and these are the higher percentage alcohol, the 40%, the 35, the 60% alcohol, and this includes vodka, rum, gin, whiskey, so all the stronger stuff. In order to calculate the percentage of alcohol inside your fermented, therefore the lower percentage alcohol like the beer, cider, and wine, you can use a hydrometer, and the hydrometer is going to give you the amount of sugar at the beginning of the fermentation and at the end of the fermentation, and the difference in the amount of sugar will determine how much alcohol is present inside your batch. And there's a formula for this, so it's the starting gravity, which measures the sugar at the beginning of the fermentation before adding the yeast, minus the final gravity, which is the sugar at the end of the fermentation, times 131.25, and it's going to give you a percentage between 4 to 20% roughly. When it comes to distilled drinks or the higher percentage alcohol like whiskey, vodka, rum, that one takes a different type of hydrometer. It takes a proof and trail hydrometer, and this does not work on drinks with sugar. Therefore, this hydrometer will not work on the beer, wine, or cider because there's a ton of sugar in these drinks, and the hydrometer will not give you an accurate value of the alcohol present. But the proof and trail hydrometer is specifically made for these distilled drinks, and it'll give you the percentage of alcohol for these strong drinks. However, what to do if you have, let's say you mix wine with vodka? Which hydrometer should you use? Should you use the hydrometer for the beer, wine, and cider, or should you use the proof and trail hydrometer for the vodka, rum, and all the other high alcohol? The thing is, each hydrometer has a specific liquid that it's accustomed to, so we cannot use either of these hydrometers, and we have to do a little math. And if I've lost some of you, I'm here to explain. And drop a comment below and let me know if you have different ways to measure your percentage of alcohol inside a cocktail, because for me, this one took a little bit of time. Bear with me, I'm gonna explain my findings on how to calculate the percentage of alcohol in cocktails. But first, let's go back to the basics, and we have to know what is a percentage of alcohol. In other terms, what is ABV? ABV is alcohol by volume, and it measures the amount of alcohol inside a liquid. So when you take, for example, vodka, which is 40% ABV, that means that the other 60% is mainly composed of water. And we have two different measurements of alcohol. You have ABV or proof, and these are just different measuring systems. Proof is double the amount of ABV. So if you take the vodka example, vodka at 40% means that the proof is at 80%. You just have to double the ABV, do times 2 in order to get the percentage of proof. The ABV is the English system and proof is the American system. And if you want to know how much alcohol you have inside a beverage, you have to do the ABV, which is your alcohol by volume, times the volume of the whole drink. There's a difference when you're drinking a shot of alcohol versus a pint. If you have the same alcohol in both containers, the bigger container will contain more alcohol because there's just more liquid. And just as a side note, if you want to know where proof comes from, it's actually from way back in the days when the English were selling their alcohol. They added a tax to alcohol sales, and some people didn't want to get scammed. A lot of people were diluting their alcohol, and the English wanted proof that this alcohol was not diluted. Therefore, they added gunpowder near the alcohol, and if the alcohol lit up, this was considered proof that it was pure alcohol and not diluted, and it would explain the tax that they were paying for the purchase. Now, when it comes to measuring the percentage of alcohol or the ABV in cocktails or a mixed drink, in this example, a portion of the cocktail is a fermented drink or a non-alcoholic beverage, and the other portion is a strong or distilled alcohol. Let's take a pretty common drink, rum and coke. The goal is to measure the amount of alcohol inside, and let's say your rum is at 35%. When you mix coke in it, there will no longer be 35% alcohol because it's diluted by the coke.
If you'd like to stick to homemade drinks, you can use the same method to calculate homemade drinks. Let's say you mix mead with rum or mead with bourbon. You can use the same calculator or the same techniques as the ones we're using to calculate rum and coke.
We have to calculate how much pure alcohol is in this drink, and in order to do so, let's give you the values. We have 50 milliliters of rum at 35% and 150 milliliters of Coke. So by adding those two together, there is 200 milliliters in your whole beverage. And in order to calculate the pure alcohol, we have to take the drink with the alcohol, which is the rum. Therefore, the 50 milliliters, we can multiply it by 0.35, which is the equivalent of 35%. And this equals to 17.5 milliliters of pure alcohol. And 17.5 milliliters of pure alcohol is on 200 milliliters, which is the whole drink. If we take the pure alcohol on the whole drink, it would be 17.5 milliliters of pure alcohol, which is just the rum, or in other words, 35%, 0.35 times 50 milliliters. So we take 17.5 milliliters of pure alcohol and divide it by 200 to know how much pure alcohol is in the rum and Coke. And this will give you 0.0875. And if we do it times 100 to find the percentage of alcohol, it's 8.75%. So your rum is no longer at 35% in the rum and Coke because of the dilution of the Coke. And based on the measurements, your cocktail now has 8.75% ABV. For those that need another example or who weren't able to bring it home, do not fret. I have another example with multiple drinks this time in order to try to bring this concept home. So we have a pina colada, for example. And the first part is to measure how much pure alcohol is inside the drink. And you do this by multiplying the ABV. So let's say 40% alcohol times the quantity. So the volume of that tequila, the volume of that rum, whichever alcohol you use. So let's get a concrete example. Here we're using 20 milliliters of 40% rum. We're adding 30 milliliters of tequila at 35%. And we have 75 milliliters of pineapple juice and 75 milliliters of coconut cream. And once you shake it all together, you come up with a cocktail. And the alcohol, since it's diluted with the pineapple and the coconut cream, it will not be equal to the 40% rum or the 35% tequila. It's going to go down a bit because the alcohol has been diluted. In order to calculate the pure alcohol, you need to start with the pure alcohol present, and in order to do so, we can start with the rum or tequila. So let's take the rum is at 40%. Therefore, we do 40% times the volume of this rum. Therefore, it's 0.40 times 20 milliliters. And this equals 8 milliliters of pure alcohol. And when we calculate the tequila, we can calculate 35% or 0.35 times the volume. So 0.35 times 30, and this equals to 10.5 milliliters. And once we use the milliliters of the tequila and the milliliters of the rum, you add them together. So it's 8 milliliters plus 10.5 milliliters. It's equal to 18.5 milliliters of pure alcohol. And you put this on the entirety or the whole batch of your alcohol because you have to calculate it within the whole drink. And by calculating the 20 milliliters of rum, 30 milliliters of tequila, 75 milliliters of pineapple, and 75 milliliters of coconut cream, the whole drink is equal to 200 milliliters. So once you put the amount of pure alcohol, which is 18.5, on 200, which is the whole drink, it'll give you 0.0925, or if you want to transform it into a percentage, it would give you 9.25% alcohol. If you have any questions, drop a comment below or book a class. We give you in-depth explanation on how the yeast works, on how ABV works, and on different elements of making beer, wine, and cider. And the link is in the description. You could book a class below. And there's one last thing that I'd like to talk about in terms of ABV. So we have the hydrometer that we spoke about earlier. Just to recapitulate, we have the hydrometer for the fermented drinks and the proof and trail hydrometer for the distilled drinks. And the proof and trail hydrometer can measure up to 200 proof. Therefore, this would be equivalent to 100% ABV, which is pretty high. However, I want to compare these hydrometers to a refractometer because a refractometer also measures alcohol by volume. And the difference is that in a refractometer, you calculate the sugar based on the ability of the sunlight to go across the liquid. So if it's easy for the sunlight to cross the liquid versus if it's very opaque, there's going to be a different measure of your alcohol by volume. And the amount of light that can pass through a solution is called refraction, therefore the name refractometer. Another difference between the hydrometer and the refractometer is that the hydrometer uses a specific gravity scale while the refractometer uses a brick scale. And you can convert one scale to the other by using calculators online. Drop a comment below if you prefer using a refractometer or a hydrometer. I I'd be curious to know what the majority of you use out there. And more about the refractometer, it needs to be calibrated before every use, which is a downside in my opinion. It just takes a little bit longer. However, it only requires a few drops of your solution to calculate. On the contrary, when you use a hydrometer, you have to use a full cylinder and fill it with your alcohol and drop the hydrometer in. So this uses more of your alcohol when measuring with the hydrometer. A hydrometer is also fragile. Once you drop it, forget about it. You'll have to buy a new one because it's made of glass and it's pretty sensitive to anything pretty much. You got to keep it close and protected. And I've read that the temperature affects your hydrometer reading. So drop a comment below and let me know, do you look at the temperature when measuring your alcohol with the hydrometer? For me personally, I've never looked at the temperature. I pretty much verify the ABV room temperature. It never goes higher than 35 degrees Celsius or lower than 15 degrees Celsius. Therefore, my range is pretty similar. And by comparing both refractometer and hydrometer, none of them is better than the other. Therefore, you may use both. It's really based on your preference. And if you found this video valuable, share with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.